perspective.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing. It can be uplifting.
Tonight, how a conservative group with funding from a billionaire GOP donor is trying to make it harder to write abortion protections into state constitutions. Plus, decoding sunscreen labels to get the right protection. And The Price is Right makes a game-changing move on the CBS Evening News.
Just simply don't have equal treatment under the law.
The beauty of the Dobbs decision is it sent it back to we the people to decide that profound moral issue.
I think people started to say, well, maybe we're willing to consider someone other than Trump. They took a look at Ron DeSantis and then went back to Trump.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Republican lawmakers are pushing ahead with their criticism of the Justice Department for the Hunter Biden plea deal, while a well-known Democratic senator, well, he's still flirting with the idea of a presidential run. Which lane, we don't know yet. We'll get to all that in a moment, along with the politics at the state level, almost 1 year after the Dobbs decision. But first, top House GOP leaders and lawmakers say Tuesday's plea agreement with Hunter Biden shows what they describe as a two-tiered system of justice in this country. This as they continue investigating the president's son. Lawmakers are divided by party about whether or not this plea agreement was in fact fair.
I don't know who the judge is in this case, but I tend to trust our justice system to get it right.
If they had this evidence on the Trump family, on President Trump's children, you would already see them locked up in jail.
I think the Biden administration did the right thing in choosing a prosecutor who was chosen by the Trump administration and giving them free rein to investigate the Hunter Biden situation.
I spoke with a panel of reporters about this and another famous Democrat named Joe earlier today. Ed O'Keefe, as you well know, CBS News' senior White House and political correspondent. Olivia Beavers is a congressional reporter for Politico, and Liz Landers is a political correspondent. Olivia, let me start with you. On the Hill this week, two topics, well, many topics, but two I want to talk to you about. Republican reaction to Hunter Biden's plea deal and the Durham testimony before the Judiciary Committee on what he found, the implications thereof, and also, not incidentally, Republican reaction to that.
I think what you're seeing with both of those cases, Republicans feel like they didn't take it far enough. With Hunter Biden, James Comer, the oversight chairman, came out calling it a sweetheart deal. My colleague reported, and he basically said this was supposed to be a comprehensive resolution in terms of the federal government's investigation into Hunter Biden's legal liabilities. House Republicans are not going to take that. They want to be looking at his businesses with foreign entities. They're going to be calling in Devin Archer within the next couple of days, who is his former business partner, and they're hoping to get more information from him on that. And I know that James Comer and Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, spoke last night, and they're trying to decide whether to move forward with contempt against FBI Director Wray, because they're frustrated about the documents that they've been trying to push and saying that the one that they got yesterday was too redacted and not really what they were hoping to review. So they're pushing forward on that. As for Mr. Durham, the special counsel who is looking into the government's investigation into Russia, he did 3 different prosecutions and only one landed. And Republicans feel like it took too long. It didn't go hard enough in whacking. And so I think that you're going to see some frustrations boiling up again with Republicans.
Ed O'Keefe, I'm sure the White House has a perspective on both, but particularly Hunter Biden.
Publicly, it's not to say much of anything at all. I'm very proud of my son, were the 6 words muttered by the president about this, and that's about all we're going to get from him until he's cornered by a reporter on it at some point again, if at all. The White House understands it's a personal, a family matter, not only a 5-year legal ordeal that may or may not be over. There may be other legal matters that we just don't know about quite yet. There is an issue also, frankly, with Hunter's I guess, for lack of a better term, love child, frankly, with a woman in Arkansas that the Biden family hasn't recognized, is yet to be settled as well. So that one remains out there as well. And it all speaks to the personal issues that Hunter has faced, that the president is especially sensitive to, as any parent would be for their child. So that's the way the White House treats this. As for what the Republicans are doing, The White House attitude is, if you really want to go down that path and continue spending taxpayer money and your time on issues related to that, you go right ahead, because there are plenty of other things Congress could be focused on that the Oversight and Judiciary Committees, at least, are continuing to refuse to focus on.
And Liz, as I was able to monitor House and Senate Democratic reaction yesterday to the Hunter Biden plea deal, such as there was, one thing kept phraseology popping up. Trump appointed U.S. attorney. Trump appointed U.S. attorney. And then there would be whatever the reaction was. That seems to be the first card that Democrats want to play on this.
Right. I think you saw someone like Congressman Jamie Raskin say that this deal that was brought forward shows that there is no favor because Hunter Biden has pleaded guilty to this now. I think Democrats are leaning into the fact that this was a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney there in Delaware, and also making the point that President Biden, when he came into office, could have replaced that U.S. attorney there in Delaware. He did not do that. I think we also saw today the Attorney General Merrick Garland speak to this. I think he was asked about this at an international forum that he was speaking at, and he said that he has let that U.S. attorney also do his work there. I think the Biden White House and the administration is being so careful to not interject in this. And actually, I spoke to a Biden campaign official yesterday who said that they don't want to comment about this, basically because they don't, because this is not in Joe Biden's nature to comment on ongoing investigations and to comment on things that the Department of Justice is doing.
And anyone who has a political reporter's notebook in this town knows there is, among many evergreen stories, the Joe Manchin story. What's on the mind of Senator Joe Manchin? What are Senator Joe Manchin's intentions? That was a regular story all through all the conversations and negotiations over the Biden legislative agenda. Now it is in a slightly different, highly more political realm. Is he going to run for president as a third-party candidate? Is he going to run for re-election? Ed, I understand you've had some conversations in this sphere. What can you tell us?
He's not ruling anything out yet.
Oh,
and as cliche,
that.
but as cliche as that is, the guidance on that is, to me at least, has changed a little bit, in that he legitimately is keeping every potential option open. Running for re-election in a state where polling, as unreliable as it may be this early on, suggests he's trailing whichever Republican opponent he faces. He's been there before. Is this time any different? We'll wait and see, and it'll depend in part on how popular the president is. Don't run for re-election and go become something like the president of West Virginia University, or run for president. But run for president as a third-party or independent candidate, or as the face of this no-labels movement that has been sort of stalking Democrats and Republicans, not only here in Washington, but across the country, threatening to put together a 50-state strategy.
With tens of millions of dollars of donations already in the bank.
And a bunch of consultants who've done this before but never done it quite successfully, and so they're looking for something to do. That is the third option that is most alluring, perhaps, to him and his world, but also the most threatening, of course, to Democrats and Republicans. One thing he's never been asked, if he's so interested in running for president, why not just challenge Joe Biden? Especially at a time when Robert Kennedy Jr. is pulling what? Somewhere between 20 to 40% in some polls? Why not just go after him if you're so interested in it? I think what he's most interested in is ensuring that people like us continue talking about him as often as possible, because then he immediately becomes a factor in whatever big issue is before the Senate at the time. So it'll be permitting reform potentially later this year, the appropriations process, the defense bill. It allows him to weigh in because he's going to be a needed vote. And that's what any senator wants, to be in the middle of it.
I would also just add that I think that Manchin is sort of tapping into something more broadly in this conversation as we go into 2024, which is, if the candidates are President Joe Biden with a rematch against former President Donald Trump, people don't want that. I talk to a lot of voters. I'm sure you guys hear this when you're traveling around, too. People are really tired of this idea that it's going to be the same two guys again. So I think that Manchin probably hears that in West Virginia from his supporters, who probably do want him to run for president, maybe some against Biden, but some probably just in this more centrist middle lane that Manchin could potentially occupy. I just see, like, the last 2.5 years, it's sort of been a conversation of which Joe is president in D.C., Joe Manchin or Joe Biden, and he is kind of keeping this conversation going right now.
Olivia?
Well, with Manchin, his last re-election was tough. He had won by 3 points, and we think that this might be his toughest one. We call it the Manchin meter, trying to detect where he is on things, and he never misses an opportunity to try to leave us guessing because, like Ed said, we will keep talking about him, and he might also, his colleagues don't want him to leave because they fear that if he leaves that Senate seat, it's going to flip red, and that Republicans only need to flip one seat to win the Senate in the upcoming election. So they're trying to encourage him to stay, and that might give him more leverage as he sort of weighs as will I, won't I, and pushing the agenda items that he wants to pass and saying, well, you know what could make me stay? This, that.
Liz Landers, Olivia Beaver, Ed O'Keefe, we thank you so very much. Saturday marks 1 year since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. New CBS News polling reveals how Americans currently feel about that historic decision. Next, we take a look at those numbers. You are streaming America Decides.
It's important to our nation.
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
It's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're going to tell you about that, too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battery rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
people are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether,
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
Welcome back to America Decides. We have insight on how Americans feel about the Supreme Court's decision, now almost a year old, to overturn Roe v. Wade. A CBS poll shows 57% of people asked think the country's decision has been bad for the country. 43% said that decision has been good. CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now. Caitlin, always great to see you.
Good to see you, too. Well, in that year since that landmark Supreme Court decision overturned Roe versus Wade, abortion rights activists have been looking at states that have passed restrictions, and they're turning directly to the voters to pass constitutional amendments to preserve access. And now a CBS News investigation has found a coordinated campaign heavily funded by a leading Republican mega donor aimed at blocking those amendments.
These were the protests that broke out last month when the Republican-dominated Ohio legislature approved a controversial plan targeting abortion access. Lawmakers set a special election for August to decide whether amending the state constitution would now need 60% approval from Ohio voters, up from just over 50%.
It's misleading. It's deceptive.
Maureen O'Connor recently retired as the Republican Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. She says Republicans are pushing an August election at a time when turnout is historically low to make it easier to secure their agenda.
They're holding an August election so that they can have this 60% requirement in time for the November election, where there will be a ballot initiative to enshrine reproductive rights in our Constitution.
In a poll last year, 59% of Ohio voters said they believed abortion should be generally legal. In Kansas and Michigan, voters preserved abortion access with just under 60% approval.
That's why they chose the 60%.
So this was strategic?
Very much strategic. When you keep changing the rules and moving the goalposts, you are intentionally silencing the vote of the people.
As abortion rights groups in Ohio raise funds nationally for a November vote on the amendment, Ohio Republican Secretary of State Frank LaRose, who first called for the 60% measure, says changing the state constitution should be rare and require a broader consensus.
We don't want to see a really radical abortion amendment put in our state constitution. This is about good government. This is about protecting our state constitution from out-of-state special interests.
But a CBS News investigation discovered this very proposal was promoted by conservative out-of-state interests. In this 2021 memo, a Florida-based nonprofit called the Foundation for Government Accountability touted the 60% supermajority requirement.
They've tried to push this idea in South Dakota, in Arkansas, in Missouri, and now in Ohio.
Campaign finance expert Brendan Fisher says much of the foundation's support can be traced to Republican mega donor Richard Uihlein, a staunch opponent of abortion rights.
A foundation controlled by Dick Uihlein has given nearly $18 million to FGA.
As the 60% measure moves through the Ohio House,
we have less than a week to save Ohio's Constitution.
Uihlein gave more than $1 million to a campaign targeting Republican lawmakers on the fence.
It's time for State Representative Al Catrona to stop the liberal takeover of Ohio.
The campaign was effective, and on August 8th, Ohio voters will get the final say.
Can we count on a no vote from you in August?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So, Major, speaking of that August election, that's happening at a time that people really aren't paying attention. It's August. Republicans had actually voted to eliminate August special elections for that very reason. They decided to bring them back for this. Turnout in the last August election was 8%. So critics are saying that this is going to be a small number of people deciding how to amend something like the state constitution.
That is a very big issue. And yet, we have the Kansas experience from last year when the assumption was turnout would be low and predictable. It was neither. So you can never be sure.
Right. And we saw on the ground canvassing efforts to make sure that people are made aware of what this means and what it means for November when the abortion measure should be on the ballot.
So we also have some new, as we indicated in the open, Caitlin, CBS News polling on the entire debate about abortion. Let us know some of the numbers.
Well, we see the numbers kind of reflected in what we've seen in these ballot measures passed in other states. Our poll showed about 57% said the overturning of Roe was bad for the country. And that also kind of speaks to what we addressed in this piece of reporting, which was that those who are trying to stop these or make it harder for these amendments to pass are really looking at those numbers, a lot of critics say, because when you look at, 57% is kind of around the number that these other measures have passed. We also see in our polling some interesting numbers about how women feel about pregnancy and delivery in states where abortion has been restricted or banned. And I think that's a really important element, too. I was just in Mississippi last week covering how that state has addressed some of these issues in the wake of Roe. Of course, Mississippi was at the center of that Dobbs decision. And we found that a lot of people were trying to step up to fill these voids in maternal care. NICU units have closed in the poorest regions of the state. Labor and delivery units have closed. An OBGYN I spoke with said that delivery is just very dangerous, and she's trying to train emergency workers to help in those rural areas. So a lot of disparities still exist, and that's why we're kind of seeing in our polling people reporting that they think it's dangerous.
So the attitudes where women who live in states where abortion rights have been restricted, they feel it's more dangerous, and that's reflective of what they see as a siphoning away of related services that are not about abortion.
Exactly, and that's something that when we have done reporting and talked to OBs and care providers, that's what they're pointing to, especially when we talk about medication abortion and other items. There is this concern that it's not addressing, things that people really need when they are having a miscarriage. The doctors kind of feeling stifled in terms of potential litigation or not knowing what the laws on the books
what
actually
advice they
are.
can give, what advice they can't, what things they may say or do that might put them in legal jeopardy. They're nervous about all that.
Exactly. And so for a lot of people, this goes beyond the procedure and more at the issue of all the uncertainty.
The ramifications continue. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so very much. As we continue to look ahead to 2024, this is a politics show after all, I sat down with former Republican Maryland Governor Larry Hogan to discuss a possible third-party run and ask him why he finds both Joe Biden and Donald Trump to be, quote, unacceptable candidates. You are streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman.
Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job?
I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Welcome back to America Decides. As the 2024 presidential field continues to take shape, as we mentioned at the top of the show, some are talking once again about a third-party nomination process, third-party candidates. Well, earlier this week, I spoke with former Republican Maryland Governor Larry Hogan about many aspects of the 2024 race. And during our conversation in Annapolis, Maryland, I asked Hogan if he would seek the nomination of the No Labels third-party ticket.
There's been an awful lot of people kind of attacking that effort, but you just don't know. Right now, there are about 70% of the people in America do not want Joe Biden or Donald Trump to be president. They don't want a rematch of 2020, and yet that appears, if the nominations were taking place today, that would be the case. And so if 2/3 of the people in the country really don't want either one of choice A or choice B, then I don't think you can close the door to C, which would be a unity ticket, put up someone else. And it's never happened before. It's never been successful. It's not something I'm pursuing, but it's you've got to leave the door open in case of emergency, break glass.
Would you be at the top of that ticket?
I mean, I think there are certainly a lot of people that would feel that I'd be a potential person.
How do you feel about it?
I think it's a long way off, and my efforts right now are trying to stop Donald Trump from being the Republican nominee, and I'm hoping that one of my friends will be able to beat him, and then I can get behind them.
As you look at the Republican field, Governor, evaluate Ron DeSantis so far.
I think DeSantis has really underperformed. You know, he started out, and we've seen this happen before in other races, but he was the one getting all the attention. He was wall-to-wall coverage on Fox News. He was the only one other than Trump that was really getting a lot of attention. He raised a ton of money. He was a fairly successful governor in a big state who got reelected. And then he started making all kinds of mistakes. I think the campaign is one of the worst I've seen so far, and he's dropped like a rock. And so I think people started to say, well, maybe we're willing to consider someone other than Trump. They took a look at Ron DeSantis and then went back to Trump. So I think he dropped 18, 20 points in the polls, and now you're seeing other people rise up. And there were a whole bunch of people stuck in single digits. I was one of them. We were all statistically, within the margin of error of each other. There were 7 or 8 different people. One of them, I think, has a chance to surpass Ron DeSantis.
Is it over for DeSantis?
I think it's getting close to being over. I mean, you can always, you see comebacks. John McCain pulled a comeback and Bill Clinton pulled a comeback. But at this point, he's headed in the wrong direction.
And if you were to describe the central mistake he made, what would it be?
I think the culture wars, the dumb comments about Ukraine, the fact that he's got some strengths, but he's also got some weaknesses. I mean, he just doesn't connect with people. He's not a good campaigner. He's not a good debater. He's a smart guy. Went to Yale and Harvard.
Doesn't lead with that.
Yeah, he doesn't lead with that. He says he went to school in the Northeast somewhere. I think, everybody was thinking he was the guy to beat, and now I don't think too many people think that.
If the nominations were propounded today, it would be Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Do you think that's how it's going to end up?
I can't really give a percentage, but look, if you go back to the 2016 election, at this point in time, everyone thought that either Scott Walker or Jeb Bush were going to be the nominee. Donald Trump was at 1% or less than 1%. So it dramatically changed. Joe Biden was not expected to be the Democratic nominee. There were people that were counting him out, and he came back and was a nominee. So I think the same thing could happen this time. Someone we're not even expecting could rise up. But conversely, we could be stuck with, two unacceptable candidates that the overwhelming majority of America doesn't want.
In your mind, of those two unacceptable candidates, which is more unacceptable?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, look, I think Trump has obviously disqualified himself from being president. I didn't support him in the last two elections and don't think he should be anywhere near the White House again. I also don't think that Joe Biden is, at this point, with all due respect, I'm not sure he's capable enough to be the leader of the free world, and he's got some strong issues. I mean, it's sort of like, his slogan should be, "Don't believe your lying eyes." I mean, a majority of Democrats don't believe he should be the nominee and don't think he should be the president.
Governor, when you say Joe Biden doesn't have the capabilities, do you mean physical and intellectual, or do you mean ideological?
I hate to say that because I don't want to be critical, and I want the president to be successful, but I do believe he's diminished. He's not the same Joe Biden he used to be, and we've seen it. We've all seen, the gaffes and the stumbling, he's 80 years old. I think he and Trump are both, perhaps they'd be the two oldest presidents in history, and we might need somebody a little bit younger.
That does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You are streaming CBS News.